Happy Pride Month, friends and lovers. As Pride Month 2021 comes to a close, you can continue to celebrate queer cinema in and outside of Pride Month, just like we have. If you haven't checked out our queer-led film episodes that we've covered A Single Man, Rafiki, Happier Season, Secret Society, Edge of 17, as well as today's episode. Get in, strap on, and enjoy. Hey friends and normally functioning, fulfilling, wholehearted, familial tie lovers. Welcome back to the For Your Reference podcast. You got your host Katie.
And OT.
Hold on to your phallic worm and dust off Monopoly, Fire and Brimstone edition, as we discuss the film with a heart as big as Australia, The Sum of Us.
Mm-hmm.
Woo-hoo-hoo. In the linear timeline, OT, we talked about wanting to see more of Schitt's Creek variety of queer characters.
We did.
And I think we found it down under, if you're nasty.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get into the stats and general information of this film. This film is based off a play written by David Stevens of the same name. The film was released a couple of years later in March of 1995. Directors Jeff Burton as well as Kevin Dowling. Again, David Stevens wrote the play as well as adapted it to the screen. In regards to the actors, we have Jack Thompson, Russell Crowe, as well as John Paulson. And if you've got your scorecards, friends and lovers, just for your reference, this is the first time we're covering Russell Crowe on this podcast.
Wow.
And I think this is the first time this has ever been uttered in happiness. Russell Crowe made me cry multiple times. You thought, with the Godfather posters that we have, that we would have covered Gladiator first, but you were wrong, friends and lovers, and we are most definitely splooshed.
Indeed we are.
Let's get into first impressions, OT. In the holy month of Pride, we always try and capture it wherever we can. So definitely get into first impressions. And I guess also the fact that we haven't covered Russell Crowe at all. Feel free to share that as well. Carry on, Maximus.
Wow. I'm not sure what I expected from this movie. It was a Katie pick. Mm-hmm. And going into it, I think I didn't really understand what was going on. There was a lot of breaking the fourth wall, but just fine. And then by the time I got to the end of the movie, I was fully engrossed and bought in. And I think all the emotions that Katie was feeling throughout the whole movie, I felt them all in the lump sum at the end.
I think that's what they call a J.K.O.T. Simmons crescendo. In the most fulfilling of ways, my love. Shout outs to Stan, which is Australia's, if you would like to sponsor us, premier streaming service. And we were scrolling the LGBT section and we saw this film and you wouldn't really know anything about it. I guess unassuming is the word. Even the description was talking about a father trying to navigate finding Mrs. Right while his son in his 20s is trying to find Mr. Right. So, even that sort of description didn't really denote to anything. But I'm glad we just dove straight in. Mm-hmm. And I really enjoyed this film. I enjoyed this film in every way I could. This definitely completes the Venn diagram circle of Katie's crying kinks.
Wow.
And not straight away, like it had to win me over, but it didn't take much for it to win me over. I talk a lot about really enjoying insular, deeply personal films and, dialogue sort of driven films. And that's exactly what this film was. One Night in Miami was also a very emotional film, but it's on Patreon for many reasons if you've listened to any of our podcast episodes. But yeah, so, you could kind of tell even without the sort of mentioning and the credit that it was based on a play that it was going to be based off a play. Yeah, because of the dialogue. I thought it was quite interesting, the use of the fourth wall. And I guess if you want to get into more detail, but just generally, I like the way that they introduced it. It was quite subtle at first, and then it was just full blown talking straight at the camera.
There was no wall, man.
No, neither with you nor with I, my love. I thoroughly enjoyed this film. You know, aside from capitalism trying to squeeze all of the milk out of both of our collective teats, I just want to watch things that I love that make me feel with the one that I love forever. Like, is that so much to ask, OT?
No, it's not.
There was quite a lot of nice Australianisms that were in this film. Not enough to alienate any sort of audiences, because there were a lot of universal themes that were in this film, and I'm sure we will pepper it throughout the film. But I do have a note here saying the only people in the world that drink VB are the people in this movie and my dad. Because we've established that no one really drinks Foster's in Australia, and then the next down would be VB.
I don't know why. Like, I tried it when I came here, and it was all right.
Yeah,
it's more the connotation, isn't it?
But doesn't it just taste of being down on your luck?
Wow.
Are you the champion of wankers, OT?
I am.
That's just general spiciness, but it's also a reference to the film. Speaking of, spoiler, otherwise wholly fulfilling daddies. I would say watch this film if you have access to it before listening to our episode. Would you, OT?
I would.
We are a comprehensive podcast, but also at the same time, it is a film to be felt. So we'll definitely recommend you go and check that out. But you're all super nasty and you like to sit on our Jupiter's cock. So feel free to continue listening to this episode. The screenplay that this film was based on won awards from the Australian Film Institute, the Montreal World Film Festival, and the film was named Best Film at the Cleveland International Film Festival.
Wow.
Right. So before we actually get into the film, and there is some muy caliente dialogue, as much accolades as it gets, it's also very tasty in its dialogue. Before we get to that, I do want to read a quote from David Stevens. The most important thing that came out of the play for me was that it actually seemed to change some people's lives. There were young gay people of both sexes who brought their parents to see the play, and the reaction we saw was very moving, and that's very rewarding. I hope the film has the same effect on people.
Oh, that's nice. That's nice. Being comfortable and to be able to live with your power and fully acknowledging that and just, being normal about it.
That's exactly it. And, we laud the arts and we talk about the arts, and it's unfortunate in, Pamela's paninis that arts is usually one of the first to get slashed with government budgets and that sort of thing. But at the end of a hard day, and sometimes to explain things that we aren't even ready to accept ourselves, arts fills in the gaps. Mm-hmm. And it's so nice to hear that this play had a healing experience, and it's also steeped in quality as well. Mm-hmm. Speaking of quality, I was doing a perusing, and come and fight me, and I will mention it on this episode. So I guess whoever's listened to this will hear my dirty secret. As much as I love and laud Toni Collette as being an international treasure, I haven't seen Muriel's Wedding.
Wow.
Yeah. So hopefully
Isn't that like a question in the citizenship test?
It goes James Cook and then Toni Collette.
Yeah.
But hopefully that shields me from the fact that I haven't watched a lot of Australian cinema and TV shows if we're not talking about Home and Away and Neighbours. I've probably watched as much as an international person, to be honest.
Wow.
But I would also mention it's because I was shielded as a little brown girl in places in Sydney. So, but I'll also give a shout out to those pesky Mormons and the reference that we had later on in this film when Russell Crowe was talking about thinking that Joyce was one of the missionaries. But so I guess my point is Jack Thompson, he's been in a lot of Australian productions, but I haven't necessarily seen it. First Australian produced, directed story about Australians we covered on this podcast was Mystery Road, and he was actually in the Mystery Road film.
Was he?
He was the crazy old white man shouting about the dogs.
There you go.
Well, there you go. And go and check out Mystery Road, friends and lovers. It's available internationally.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else you want to say about Russell Crowe before we get into discussion?
No, we love the Crow and his
Crow.
companion, the Tugger. Or is it just Tugger?
I will say I did make a note, and I do want to get your thoughts on this before we talk about the film specifically. When did Russell Crowe become so charismatic? Because I feel like if we're talking about like his career and the roles he's taken, I kind of took him probably just a bit past his prime. Like even Gladiator, I watched many years after. Was he always so fucking charismatic? Because I loved him in this film.
I don't know if I've ever sat there and thought, oh, mate, Russell Crowe is one charismatic dude.
But he was in this film, was he not, sir?
Yeah, but I think this is all before he grew into himself.
He wasn't necessarily the son, but I do feel like there was a lot of warmth radiating out of him. Like there was a genuine warmth about him in this film. And I guess I wonder if that permeated throughout the rest of his filmography. But I really enjoyed him. I thought he was very charismatic in this role. I love how earnest this film was as well. I think, there are films, especially when we're talking about queer characters, where it can become very cerebral and it can become very emotional, but it's tethered to deep trauma. Fair enough. But also at the same time, this film somehow was able to address the hard truths, but also have more of a dynamic between the light and shade. I don't know if it's just because it was the 90s or if storytelling has just taken a more introspective sort of path. Like comparing Schitt's Creek again, Jeff and Harry had a very good relationship, but it wasn't without any sort of struggle or any sort of conflict. You can see that they worked hard to get where they were, to be that father and son that we see in the film. It's more like external sort of factors like fucking Joyce that brings that homophobic sort of bigotry.
Yeah.
Right? And she can fucking, as you say, go in the bin.
Get in the bin.
Get in the bin.
Go in the bin is a bit too polite. They can go and stand next to it.
Well, I will Hadouken her into landfill. How about that?
Better.
Non-trademark, but also fatality. Go and listen to our Mortal Kombat episode. But I 100% accolades all round. I don't like to give indications, but apparently when I feel like they're perfect, I do like to give indications on how I'm going to rate it during Christmas. But there you go, friends and lovers. Let's get into the film. I want to talk about something that I can never reconcile, and I won't be able to get to anything else in the film until we actually address this. And it's the contrast between Jeff and Greg, because we see that both of them have very different relationships with their parents, specifically their fathers. And, we talked about this in our reference degustation where we covered Boy, where Taika Waititi, we called it the biggest fantasy out of any sort of sci-fi out there because they had a scene where the dad said, "I love you, son. I'm sorry." There are some moments that just feel great in film, but they don't feel real in real life. So it was interesting. And it's always interesting to me watching stories unfold with a child, no matter how old they are, because Jeff isn't coming of age, like he's 24, right? But it's always interesting to me seeing the child, however old they are, and the parent. It always confuses me when there is genuine unconditional love, because people say conditional, but they don't necessarily mean it. We're not going to have a Cookie and Lucius Lyon situation, OT.
Oh, you're
My love is conditional, sir.
I already know you're not a ride or die, so don't even bring that here. Don't bring that.
Yeah, so keep your OT coins to yourself, thank you. But it always confuses me, and it is for your projection if you're nasty, but it always confuses me, and I don't know what my life would have been like if I had a healthy, open relationship with my parents. But I want to talk about the difference between Greg and Jeff.
Oh, you could see the difference. It's night and day.
Yeah.
You know, he is used to hiding his relationship from his family because that's what he knows. His comfort is in that.
Yeah.
So when he came to Jeff's house and it's all open and the father walked in, he's like, oh, he stood up. He shot up quite quickly.
Yeah.
Went to the corner. Was like, oh, let's just pretend or like we're doing nothing.
Yeah.
But that's not it. You know, it was domestic. He described it as domestic, which is quite something, you know?
Yeah.
The level of normalcy he was not used to the extent of it being uncomfortable to him. And fair enough. Fair enough. He wasn't ready to be faced by the reality of, oh, this is how things should be. And it just took a moment for him to sort of digest it all. And I don't blame him for him. I didn't think that he was being a dick necessarily. It's just a shock to the system.
No, I agree. And I think it is credit to the writing because I didn't necessarily have a problem with Greg, but there was definitely shit that he needed to work out himself before he even considered being in a relationship with Jeff.
True.
But that's a very interesting scene. And I guess that also informs, like, every moment where we have Harry's character, Jeff's dad, reinforced how fucking amazing he was. But also, like I said, it's not necessarily like he was that unblemished hero. He had gone through shit and he also inflicted shit knowingly to others. And we see that later on in the film. Right? So it's not necessarily he's this perfect dad he loves and embraces and goes to gay bars with his son. All that is true, but love is complex and there are so many different layers to it. And he encapsulated what it means to love unconditionally in an imperfect world.
And I think that's where the for your reference saying, you know, this is, if we had a bingo card, this is what we say all the time. Mm-hmm. No one can fuck you up more than your parents.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that saying encapsulates the title of the movie, The Sum of Us. Because we get to see the juxtaposition of attitudes and behaviors laid out so perfectly and beautifully. Uh-huh. And we see the difference night and day. And I think it just shows us, you know, in the sum of us, because it's a generational thing, we pass it all down. We know what we inflict and what we bring up. All our baggage, we just put it onto someone else and it just carries on.
It's not just quirky personality traits you pass down to your kids.
Yeah. Unless you go out of your way, like Jeff's dad did, to understand, to accept that, hey, I want to make a difference. I want to understand and I want to be part of this. Because at the end of the day, I just want to be happy. Yeah. And who doesn't want that?
Yeah, but it's also that double-sided coin, right? Because I kind of understand Greg, because if I came over to like visit your parents and your parents were openly asking about our sex life, I wouldn't be comfortable with that. So sometimes it's good to be raised in shame.
My parents didn't refer to you as my friend, so it's all good.
I didn't know we were going to get that personal, but yes, I've been your friend.
My friend! How's your friend doing?
But it's been over a decade. Can I at least be the mega friend or the super friend? I'm still the friend.
Come on now, you know what you're doing under the covers.
Am I like an acquaintance after 10 years?
Yeah, probably. Oh, where did your close acquaintance go to?
So in that sense, I get it. But like the point is, don't project your shit on other people. So I kind of agreed with Greg recoiling, for lack of a better word, at the thought of being in a relationship, because they could have tried it and just catastrophically ruin each other. Yeah. Right. Albeit some nice nasty sex in between, I'm sure. But they would have catastrophically ruined each other instead of just doing the work and then coming together, which is what we see in this film. You know, there are moments when we watch films, and I guess we're condensing the human experience of life in less than 2 hours. So that's not necessarily something easy or something necessarily true to real life. But that's part of the problem I have with rom-coms, right? You have a fucking dickhead, and then he turns up at the end as a dickhead still. Don't try and say Colin Firth in either Pride and Prejudice or Bridget Jones. I'll come for you, mate.
You said it yourself. I didn't have to.
Because I saw you about to say the sweet name out of those nasty lips. But yeah, I don't think there was anything wrong with Greg. I just think he was going on a journey, and I'm glad he didn't project his shit onto Harry, even though it hurt Harry's feelings. But yeah, it would have, that whole notion of having a healthy relationship with your parents. Congratulations to everyone that has. Even if I did have that, I don't know what that would mean for me. But I also don't like the idea of, like, I'm super nasty, but our family don't listen to this. So
yeah, and I'm comfortable in that. I don't think I can foresee a situation where I get to be that close, or how that would bloody make me feel or turn out to me as a person. It's weird. It's weird. I'm comfortable in my space.
We sound like the people Moses was trying to convince in Prince of Egypt. Like, yeah, life could be better, but you know.
Well, there's comfort in your shame.
Again, check out Astronomy Club. They have a muy caliente sketch in regards to that. But I thought that was very interesting because I wanted to outline that I don't necessarily think Greg was a bad person. He just had shit that he had to work through, which a lot of us have to work through as well. But even the fact that his Harry was so accepting, that made him uncomfortable. So that means you're not even ready, bruv.
And I think the kudos to him is, even when he was uncomfortable and Jeff was like begging him, oh, just come back. You know, he didn't want it to turn into just a sexual thing, because it's more, you know, there's more to it than just the physical sort of relationship. And I'm glad that he didn't take that route. Otherwise, I don't think they would have had that. Towards the end of the movie, they would have had that situation where they'd grown each individually, and then they have this moment where they come, okay, we've lived our lives separately, we've experienced our own shit. Some of us have become more comfortable, and then let's move on. Yeah,
and I guess we've talked about, you know, Harry, but let's talk about Greg's dad for a second. Usually this is where I say he was a fucking problem. He is a fucking problem. But also, you know, parents like this exist, right? There's a quote that really sums it up where Greg says, my dad is someone I live with but don't know very well or like very much. I'm not judging, but I do wonder how old he was, because for someone that moved out of home very, very soon after high school, I don't really know when and if people ever moved out of home unless they were about to get married. Maybe in the 90s, they just stayed home until they got married.
Maybe so.
Because at that point, I just go and do my shit by myself. They don't know anything.
True.
Really. But that's neither here nor there, I suppose. But you could really tell that he couldn't be himself at home. And I do like that they didn't focus too much on it. And, you know, another fantasy scene where the dad said, I'm going to beat you, instead of actually beating him. Wouldn't it have been nice to at least be asked first?
Yeah, but at that age, she was like, you know what, give it your best shot. There's a certain age where my dad would never say that shit, where it was more like, oh, I'm giving you a talking to. I'm not going to try and beat you because you've grown up quite a bit. So, yeah, there's an acceptance, there's a level, there's an age where the belt no longer comes out.
And the interesting thing is, I feel like that's a perfect childhood at that point if you stop getting beaten.
Well, there are other things they can do to you, though.
True. How did you feel when Greg was pre-gaming before Mardi Gras? Were you anxious because you were worried at what was about to happen? Because we saw the parents were at home watching TV. So it was quite clear that he was going to appear on the TV at one point, even with his smoking gun and all. Were you celebrating? and all yes about it? Or were you like worried that like something was going to happen to him?
No, it was clear that they're going to see him. I knew the kind of reaction that they would get because we've seen the dad talk before.
Yeah. Even the fact that he was taking dance classes was a problem.
But mate, those guys zoomed in on him.
But it wasn't like he was worried that the camera was there. He was enjoying, he was living
Because
his
he thought,
moment.
hey, what are the chances my family are going to see this? Zilch.
Yeah.
Next minute, they pat into him. They're like, oh, mate, there's like a whole train of people pass. Nada.
And I guess this is interesting. And I talked about Taika, not long ago. But this film, I feel like delivered the depths of emotion without taking you all the way there, whether it's like parental beatings or, more sort of deeper sort of trauma scenes. But this film is rated R, OT.
Really?
Yeah, I'm not necessarily sure why, but I do love all of the emotion that was injected into this film.
Yeah, me too.
I guess just while we're smoothly transitioning, I just want to mention I was on Greyhound Watch and there were, I think, about 3 or 4 greyhounds that were being taken on a walk.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think Theo would manage not being the kingpin in the household?
Nah, he loves all the attention.
He does. He really loves all the attention. But, shout outs to greyhounds also. Shout out again to Pride and Prejudice because there were also greyhounds in there as well. I want to talk about Harry. It was interesting to me, I guess, because of modern storytelling. And I guess when you're aware that there are going to be gay characters, usually the coming out or the finding out is part of the crescendo of the film. But we're already past that at this point when we were watching this film. Yep. And very early in the film, Harry breaks the fourth wall and he talks about his son finding Mr. Right. Yeah, you heard me. I said Mr. Right. So like he already knew that his son was gay. And I was like, okay, so that's not an obstacle we need to get through. Can we have more stories like that, please?
Yeah, definitely. I think the focus or the onus has been too much on the trauma where we need to move past that.
Well, it's all necessary.
It's necessary, but I think
it's nice to have different vegetables in our trauma salad.
I think when you start normalizing things a bit more, that's when it seems, like part of every day. Like seeing a black person lead a movie. It stops being,
leading a Star Wars movie, mind you.
But yeah, it's just ridiculous. So I think normalizing is the next stage.
Yeah, but then there's also stories that can only be told and are able to resonate. So I think there's space for all.
True.
Don't get rid of my sad movies. I like my sad movies. Not that I'm
getting rid of them. I just, in terms of digesting, especially in the world we live in now, it makes it a bit easier to see, consume, watch.
Go and watch your Friends reunion then if you want something easy. Jesus. Wow. We're talking about cinema. OT cinema. I have a note here. Harry showing Greg his garden is like my dad making OT do all of the TV and computer stuff at the house.
I'm just wondering when the urinating in the garden bit will come and what equivalent that would be.
Well, you're not that great of a techie if you know urinating on like a TV isn't going to help. You know what they say about TVs? They're like lemons. I think that automatically makes it a Scorsese, doesn't it?
Put some all-in on that shit.
Jesus. Okay, before we get to Jeff, I want to talk about Harry, the generational trauma of it all, because Harry's mum entered a loving relationship with Mary after her husband died, right? And it wasn't anything to blink an eyelash at. Is that the phrase, OT?
Let's go with that.
It wasn't enough to shake an ass at in the For Your Reference household. And it was played off as very normalized and it's fine. But throughout the film, there were flickers of footage that we weren't privy to. And that's kind of when we get to the point of Harry having a stroke, right? Shout outs, non-shout outs to Joyce. It had nothing to do with her. More rather him accepting his family, really, his mother as well as Jeff. And he has a very lovely, moving soliloquy, if you will, where he talks about, you know, of course I wanted my son to find a nice girl and to have kids. You know, me and my wife making a child together was such a beautiful experience, and it makes me sad that he'll never have that. But everything else he fucking gets. You hear me? More eloquently, but in a KT way.
True.
And it's interesting because, like we said, this is the first and probably only instance we've ever seen of unconditional love. But the way, the journey for him to have that unconditional love was because he has so much guilt, overwhelming guilt, that he didn't do enough for his own mother. Mm-hmm. Because we see someone driven off in a car during the time that he has the stroke, and it isn't until later on in the film that we found out they were both getting older. So it wasn't necessarily they were just hateful bigots and they wanted to like separate them, but it did get to a point where they were both too old to be together. They could have found
a solution where both of them get to stay somewhere
like a
together.
San Junipero Black Mirror way. Yeah, I get that.
Sending them away from each other, that it's just cruel.
Yeah, but with families as fucked up as ours, any reprieve is a reprieve, sir.
I know, but to me, just seeing that scene at the end, and that's what got me.
Yeah.
You know, everything else Katie was crying over, but that scene was something else.
Yeah.
Tearing two sweethearts as old as they are apart from each other. They knew it was coming, but they didn't make it easier on the day.
No.
And the family to just watch that.
Yeah.
Man.
Because the world is going to treat and see you however the fuck they're going to see you. The people that are in your ring, that are in your corner, you would want them to be fucking happy for you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And one of the truest moments that we have in the film, you know, was Harry talking about and lamenting to love and be loved is one of the most beautiful things in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like it has a somber veneer now because we know that he was, unfortunately, participating in the breaking of such a beautiful love.
Yeah.
As Jeff mentions in the film, very natural. Mm-hmm. It's a very natural thing to want to be with someone and have them want to be with you.
True. And it's sad that the Grand didn't live,
much longer
after that. So you deny a person the love, the person that they've been comfortable with this whole life. And for what?
Yeah.
If I had to really, really dig deep and ask for more, it'd be Gran and Mary.
Yeah.
I'd wanted more Gran and Mary.
But didn't you also feel emotional watching Jeff step up and look after Harry after he had the stroke? That was really emotional for me.
It was emotional. I think the bit where it got extra saucy for me is when Harry was seeing Jeff go out and pursue Greg in the garden.
Yeah.
And realizing that he didn't settle. He didn't just lose sight of what he needed to do with his own life. He didn't.
Excuse me, that line where Harry was on the fucking toilet saying the most poetic, beautiful things, and he was saying that it would break his heart if his son ever gets to the point where he forgets how to love and be loved, and it was followed up by a fart and I was a mess. How dare you? Like, that was so beautiful.
At least I could say this in my lifetime or insistently throughout. You cried at a fart scene.
Fuck off. I did. I fucking did, and I'll do it again, unfortunately. Oh, but this film, it was like this film was so beautiful without the fucking pretension. Can we get past all of the wankeriness and just wank ourselves in splooshes? Can we?
And I love the fact that even when during the toilet scene, farts being excused and all, it was more to show how the stroke deprived him of his privacy and all the elements that he was so accustomed to, or all of us are accustomed to.
And also he shares in the same sort of exchange that he thought that he was going to, and he was more than prepared to do the same thing with Jeff. Because it was touched on a couple of times talking about AIDS. So he was getting himself educated, which is what everyone should do. And he was more than willing to be the one to look after his son. Sad, albeit, but also very pragmatic and again, unconditional in all the love.
Agreed, man.
Man, this film is so fucking beautiful. And I love it. Like, I don't even understand how you can have such deep emotion without the wankery artsiness. I don't understand, but here we are, my love. Mm-hmm. Well, let's just talk about full-blown wankers. Let's talk about Joyce. We talked about all the beauty. Now let's talk about the bigot. I'm working on my screenplay, friends and lovers. The beauty and the bigot.
Wow. And Fath gets to play the bigot, eh?
I was talking about you, motherfucker.
Okay, don't.
Surprise, motherfucker.
Oh, Dexter's coming back. I wonder how that will be.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Well, Prison Break came back and it shouldn't have.
It shouldn't have, but I'm intrigued to see what they'll try and do to recover it. Just anything, really.
Yeah, I still need to finish Dexter, but that's a story for another day.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's talk about Joyce. Everything was going so perfectly in this film. There was definitely a lot of pain. There was a lot of resonating sort of themes, but there was no real anchorage in pain and trauma, and that was fucking Joyce. I want to talk about, let's just get to the end of the film. Everything was going swimmingly, right? And then she finds the gay porno mags, and I was so worried. I was like, oh, I hope Harry doesn't be like, oh, that's my gay son. Like, I hope he he's steadfast in his love for his son, and he wasn't ashamed at all, and he shouldn't be ashamed.
He wasn't adopting Thomas as well, so that's good.
That's a Bible reference. You taught me. Mm-hmm. I still have it on my browser tab, so that means I get to go to heaven, right?
Well, love is a religion, mate, so yeah.
If I can't go to heaven, I'm sliding down the pole with Lil Nas X. That's all I'm going to say.
The devil will be looking for that talk, mate.
Someone that I don't want to see twerk is Joyce. So she says really terrible, disgusting, deplorable things, saying, why would you buy these? And you encouraged him? As if looking at a gay porno mag makes you gay. If you believe that, I'm not getting into it. Feel free to unsubscribe forever if that's how you feel. But thoughts?
Yeah, I wouldn't agree with you that she didn't have any trauma. Clearly, she had some trauma in her life because they kept on talking about how sad her life was prior to meeting Harry. But
trauma doesn't make you a fucking bigot.
It doesn't.
It doesn't make you homophobic.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
I was just shedding some light,
No.
Yeah, and we knew that she wouldn't. She referred to sex as giving an onion. Hey?
Yeah.
Of course she wasn't going to sit there and be like, oh, I'm fully accepting to this.
I did make a note. Maybe Joyce would enjoy sex if she didn't call it giving her husband some onions. I reject the notion, sir. So just because you're sexually frigid, that means you're allowed to be homophobic? Reject, sir. Dismissed from court.
I reject it as well. I'm just saying.
You're the one that said it.
Not that it gives her an excuse. I was just saying that.
Not everyone
you
deserves...
painted her as someone who's not been through anything.
No,
and that
I'm
wasn't
just saying,
the true fact.
I'm saying there's no excuse to be homophobic.
There's none.
And you know what? People were given the right to be homophobic when we had a fucking plebiscite not long ago in Australia. Anyway, fuck off. I'm not hearing that. Especially in the holy month of Pride, you motherfucker. It would be better that you were a motherfucker than what you are right now.
And the fact that Harry's resistance in telling her, we knew there was going to be some friction.
So you
when
acknowledge
she did
she's a terrible person.
She's a terrible person.
But to even get there, that's evidence why you're the edgelord, sir.
Why?
It took this long for you to just say what you should have said 2 minutes ago.
I think I started saying that.
She doesn't need the delicate hand.
Didn't I start off saying she's terrible?
Yeah, but she doesn't need the delicate graces that you're giving her, is my point.
I look at people as multifaceted and you can't just be one thing.
Yeah, she's multi-fuck-faceted. That's what she is.
But she does come to realize the error in a ways, which is something that we don't get to
Like-
see quite often.
You could, in every other sense, be a good person and still homophobic, so that makes you a shit person. That's it.
It does.
You can't agree with me and then also defend her.
I'm not defending her, mate. I'm not defending her. I'm saying...
This is why you can't have a wife and a mistress, because you can't please both, apparently.
Oh, wow. Is that an invitation? All I'm saying is, she's bigoted in a ways, but she does come to see the error. She had this preconceived idea of who Jeff was and how Jeff was like and how all this...
Boo!
People are allowed to grow and learn.
Boo! Strong disagree. Hard subscribe, sir.
All right.
All right, well, that's pretty much all I have. I just wanted to note to the places I recognize. Obviously, even if you're not Australian, you would have seen the Harbour Bridge. You would have recognized the Opera House. The Botanical Gardens is very cute and very lovely. You see later on in the film. And also Darling Harbour. Mm-hmm. Many nights talking to OT, not publicly wanking, but talking to OT in our long distance, yes.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man. The scarp footage of flicking beans on the Darling Harbour, eh?
And if you see me bean flicking in any sort of old Google archives, mind your business, friends and lovers. There's a private public bean flicking. All right, friends and lovers, if you've been celebrating Pride Month, hopefully you enjoyed it. If you haven't, stop being a fucking bigot, Joyce. But you have OT apologists over here. Wow. We'd like to finish off in a segment we call For Your Reference. OT.
I'm going to reference Get Real. It came out the same year as the movie covered with Thanks for Coming.
Nice.
It's pretty similar, actually. A bit more darker undertones, but yeah, definitely give it a watch. Charlotte Brittain is in it, and she's awesome.
We love you, Seth and Jamal. Make sure you check out the Thanks for Coming podcast. I've got 2 references. Well, one is a collective. In the holy month of Pride, go and check out the films that we've covered as a result of or with queer characters outside of Pride Month. And also, Australian-wise, check out Mystery Road. We also have an episode on it. Mm-hmm. If you'd like to follow us on Twitter and Instagram, we're at For Your FPod.
Write us an email at hello@fypodcast.com.
We're also on Tugger Podcast if you'd like to leave a rating and review. And we'll see you guys next week.
See ya.
Bye.